Hello, this is Miss Kyler, and I'm back again. And in this lesson, we're going to have two lectures. The first one is on the poem called To Night. Now, on page 53 of your textbook, volume D, there is a little snippet about Charlotte Smith. And it talks about how her life is full of melancholy, and we see this in the way that she expressed herself in her sonnets, and she actually helped revive the sonnets. The sonnet was originally introduced in the Renaissance. Petrarch brought those over from Italy, and they were made popular by people like Shakespeare and Donne and Milton. And now in the Romantic period, we see them being revived now by yet another female author, Charlotte Smith. She wrote a whole book full of sonnets called the Elegiac Sonnets. And here it is. I'll read it to you. I love thee, mournful, sober-suited night, when the faint moon yet lingering in her wane, and veiled in clouds with pale, uncertain light, hangs o'er the water of the restless main. In deep depression sunk, the enfeebled mind will to the deaf-cold elements complain, and tell the embosomed grief, however vain, to sullen surges in the viewless wind. Though no repose on thy dark breast I find, I still enjoy thee, cheerless as thou art, for in thy quiet gloom the exhausted heart is calm though wretched, hopeless yet resigned, while to the winds and waves its sorrow given may reach, though lost on earth, the ear of heaven. So, this is actually an Italian sonnet. And there are two different kinds. There are English sonnets and Italian sonnets. First of all, what is a sonnet? Okay, a sonnet is a 14-line poem in iambic pentameter. I'll explain that a little later. The first part always presents a problem, a question, or a quandary. And then after the first part, we find a turn, whereas the tone changes. And this turn is also called the volta, Italian, because sonnets originally came from Italy. So volta means turn. This turn usually initiates the second part, which presents a solution, answer, or resolution. So that turn really will tell you whether it's an Italian or an English sonnet, depending on where it is. In an English sonnet, you usually have 3 quatrains and followed by a couplet. So the turn doesn't really come until the last 2 lines. This is an Italian sonnet, and we'll look at it more in depth. Okay, so when it's Italian, instead of being made up of 3 quatrains followed by a couplet, it's made up of an octave, which is a stanza of 8 lines, and a sestet, which is a stanza of 6 lines. We'll see that in a minute. So here we have the octave, the first 8 lines, and as we can see in that octave, that's where the speaker is expressing her quandary. And we see, I love thee, mournful, sober-suited night. So in the whole thing, she's talking about depressing and how unlovable this night is. So the question is, why does she love something so dark and sullen? It doesn't seem to fit together. There's a contrast there, something conflicting. And then we have a turn, and that turn comes at the word though. So we often find a turn in a sonnet at a part where it sounds like there's a contradiction here. So it's kind of like the turning of the tide. So the word though signals a change in the tone. And that also signals the beginning of the last 6 lines, the sestet. And as we can see in the sestet, the speaker comes to a resolution as to why she enjoys the night. The word though, no repose on thy dark breast I find, I still enjoy thee, cheerless as thou art, for in thy quiet gloom the exhausted heart is calm, though wretched, hopeless yet resigned, while to the winds and waves its sorrow given may reach, though lost on earth, the ear of heaven. So this is why I love the night. This is where I find repose, and this is where I'm quiet enough to reach beyond earth into something bigger. Okay, and we also said that in a sonnet is made up of iambic pentameter. Okay, so let's explain that a little bit. So an iambic is a foot, which is stressed, unstressed combination, and an iamb is an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. So we see that here, I love. So I is unstressed, love is stressed. I love the mournful, sober suited night. So we see that I am. And you can kind of hear that word I am, where it's the unstressed I am is the stressed. So that's how I always remember it. The pentameter part means there are 5 I ams in each line. We have I love the mournful, sober suited night. So there we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. So every line is going to have 5 iambs. So that means that iambic pentameter. In every line, there are 5 feet of unstressed followed by a stressed syllable. Okay. Also, you should take away from this part where she's talking to the word night. I love thee, mournful, sober suited night. That's actually an example of an apostrophe. And now apostrophes also are a form of punctuation that we use when we show possession or we use a contraction. But this is another way to use the word apostrophe. An apostrophe is when in a poem the person addresses someone who is far away or long dead as if they are present, or addressing an object or part of nature as if it were human and alive and could respond to them. So here we see, I love thee, mournful, sober suited night. On page 54, there's another sonnet. It's called To Sleep. So she's talking to sleep as if it were a person. Here it's to night. So she's dedicated this poem to the state of night, at nighttime. So we see that in thy dark breast. So she's still talking to night throughout the whole thing. Cheerless as thou art. I'm just talking to you and I'm trying to understand you, night. You're strange and mysterious. So looking at the word choice in this poem, you can see the romantic love of nature. And we'll see that a lot more as we continue with the romantic period. But the nature that the romantics love is not the soft, light, and peaceful nature, the calm meadows. That's not the sort of nature that romantics yearn for. For the romantic, it must be dark, wild, untamed, and gloomy, untouched by human hands, as it were. It's like the bare nature as it was when in creation. And so like it's kind of like we see these words like uncertain light. In romantics, nothing can be certain. Everything has to be really wild and uncertain and gloomy. Restless main. The water has to be surging, like the sullen surges, raging, just like we saw with the demon lover. Remember in the ballad? We saw how the water was just the storm and the gloom and the wrecking of the ship. That's what the romantics love to see. So, just to sum it all up quickly, a sonnet is a 14-line poem in iambic pentameter. It presents a problem, quandary, or question in the first part. The turn signals the second part, and the second part presents the solution, the resolution, or the answer. An Italian sonnet, first part is an octave, and the second part is a sestet. An apostrophe is something that addresses someone who's far away or not alive as if they were present, or addresses an object or part of nature as if it were a person and could answer. And tonight, I want you to use this as an example of the romantic's obsession with nature. And for the romantic's, nature was never tame, quiet, or peaceful. It had to be stark, wild, dark, untamed, gloomy, and restless. Remember, we're going to be getting into the Gothic feeling pretty soon. And to the romantic's, nature equals freedom. It's kind of this liberty. And city equals slavery, dirt, and crime, and all that bad stuff. So nature, good, happy. City, bad, ugly. Okay, so thank you for listening to this lecture. Don't forget to listen to the next one. It's actually going to show the other side. This was the nature. Now the next lecture is going to talk about the city. Thanks for listening, and good luck on your quiz.